Welcome to the Vernuccio Novak Report. From New York, this is Frank Vernuccio.
And from West Palm Beach, Florida, this is John Wilson.
Rub it in, John. I wish I was there.
It's
And
cold
John,
today. You don't wish you were there that much?
well, it's snowing outside here in New York, so anything looks better than that. John,
Gotcha.
I am thrilled that you're with us today. Um, as we discussed off air, the Texas Attorney General Paxton is suing battleground states for unconstitutional changes to their 2020 election laws. This is a different type of lawsuit. Now, the ones that have received all the publicity up till now have been challenges most manifestly made by Rudy Giuliani that there was fraud in the election process itself, that dead people were voting, that votes were cast repeatedly, votes by dead people, and so forth. They have not been all that successful in court so far. Paxton's challenge is a totally different legal theory. He's saying that the individual states, Pennsylvania particularly, um, change their voting process in violation of their own state laws. That without regard to the will of the legislatures, they just enacted a new way of voting, totally kept the legislature out of the process whatsoever. Now, you just mentioned before we went on that the Supreme Court has accepted the case. John, your thoughts about its chances?
I think the chances in this litigation are actually extremely good. And I say that tempering my enthusiasm with the cases that have already gone before and that have been dismissed by the various courts across the country. Uh, I've been listening, of course, to talk radio, and I've been listening to the news on all these lawsuits that have been standing up and falling down. But this is different. And I think people have to understand the differences in the Paxton lawsuit. First of all, this is unique in that the US Supreme Court has very, very few cases brought to them where they have original jurisdiction. The US Supreme Court is an appellate court, the ultimate appellate court of the nation. And cases typically reach the US Supreme Court only after they've been heard by lower courts, lower federal courts, lower state courts, whatever. This is one of the few instances where the US Supreme Court has jurisdiction that the lawsuit is brought directly to the Supreme Court. So makes this an extremely unique situation of having a court case being brought directly to the Supreme Court under their own original jurisdiction. That makes this extremely important as a litigation. Another factor that's extremely interesting in this case is that I was concerned when I heard about the Paxton lawsuit that the court might determine that Texas doesn't have the standing, the ability to challenge what Pennsylvania does in regards to their laws. The US Supreme Court accepted this case on a vote of 6-3. That means that Judge Roberts joined in the decision to allow this litigation to proceed in the Supreme Court. But that also means that the US Supreme Court accepts that Texas has standing to bring this challenge. If I remember correctly, Texas stated its basis for making this challenge. They stated that what happens in one state regarding the election affects all states. And so on that basis, Texas has asserted that they have standing to challenge what Pennsylvania does. So this is an extremely unique litigation. And while we haven't seen much to get our hopes up for the Republican cause here, this is a turning point, and this is a significant action.
Now, this is not confirmed, but there is preliminary word that 8 other states are planning to join in with Texas on the matter. And I understand this not only affects Pennsylvania, by the way, but affects the actions that were done in Georgia, Michigan, Wisconsin, as well as Pennsylvania.
Yes.
Combined, those states combined certainly could change the nature of the election itself.
Absolutely. The basis for the Paxton lawsuit is that Pennsylvania and these other states, in particular Pennsylvania, ignored their own statutes and changed the rules for the acceptance of either votes by mail or absentee ballots or any other not in-person voting. Pennsylvania in particular blatantly disregarded their own statute regarding the time frame for accepting mail-in and absentee ballots. Now, a state court has the right to hear a constitutional challenge to such a law and to invalidate that law on constitutional grounds. The problem here is that's not what the Pennsylvania court did. The Pennsylvania court did an end run around whatever the statute states and blatantly ignored the language of the statute. How they did it, I'm not going to pretend to know. I'm not going to pretend I read the opinion, so I don't have those facts. I'll admit that freely to the viewers. But what I do know is that the Pennsylvania statute delineates one process, and the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania ignored that process. And
John,
so
in all this, is there not also a sense, and will this not be sort of a subtext in the discussion of the case and the arguing of the case, that some of the state officials have gone out of their way to ensure that their candidate wins by doing an end run around their own election laws? We heard, for example, in Pennsylvania, I believe it was the state attorney general who said, this is before election day, he said, there is no way Trump is going to win in my state. Almost a battle cry to the extent that we're going to do whatever we can, legally or illegally, to make sure that this election goes the way we want it.
Well, I'm going to fall back on my criminal practice here. When I was a prosecutor, what I had to establish for a jury for a finding that someone was guilty of a crime is that they committed the crime. I did not have to establish what their motivation was in committing the crime. Everybody wants to know what the motivation is of the person that commits a crime, but you don't need to establish that in court. The same is true here. Whatever the motivations are of the state officials, their hatred of Donald Trump, their hatred of Republicans, their desire for power, and the desire to win, those are all their motivations. It's not necessary to delve into what those motivations are. What is necessary is to delve into their actions and the illegality of their actions. And the Paxton lawsuit gets to the heart of that very issue. The actions taken by the state officials were illegal, whatever the reasons for taking those illegal actions.
Jen, let me just go slightly afield from the Paxton lawsuit into some of the prior suits that were brought up. As I understand it, the evolution of the Democrat Party position has been originally, there is no fraud, that's ridiculous, what are you talking about? Then gradually they're saying, well, there may have been fraud or misdealings one way or the other, but not enough to change the nature of the outcome. Now, John, if I rob a bank and I only take half the money in the bank, I'm arrested, go before a judge, and I say, Your Honor, I didn't break the bank. I left them enough money to keep operating. I only took half the money. You shouldn't prosecute me. Isn't that, in essence, what the Democrats are arguing here?
Yes, there's a complete change in their position over even just the past week. At first, you're right. The position was there's no fraud here. There's no fraud here. There's no fraud here. That position changed with all of the lawsuits that have been brought to one of, well, maybe there was some fraud, but it's not enough to affect the election. And that position constantly is evolving as well. As you probably saw in my recent article in usagovpolicy.com, the evidence of fraud does exist. There is a website, here'stheevidence.com or .org, I forget which, and they outline the sworn affidavits of a series of persons involved in elections across the nation, outlining their observations. Mm-hmm. This information is evidence. Now, whether or not you believe the evidence, whether or not you find it compelling, whether or not it's enough to establish a case, that's the wall that the Giuliani Powell people have been running into in establishing their cases. Some courts don't feel that the evidence is sufficient. Some courts feel that it's not enough to overturn the results of the election. Some courts, quite frankly, just do not want to be involved in overturning elections. and we'll find any excuse possible not to be involved in that process, no matter what. Put that all together, there is evidence, and to say otherwise is nothing but a lie. Whether or not that evidence is compelling enough to change the results of the elections, that remains to be seen. There again, this is why this Paxton lawsuit is so important. It doesn't need evidence of voter fraud. It doesn't need evidence of motivations. It just needs to establish that these states did not follow their own rules.
Isn't it disturbing, when we're seeing almost an acceptance of a certain level of fraud? I mean, how much fraud is acceptable, at this point? For a long time, we've had in America almost a boys will be boys attitude about Democratic Party in particular. I'm not saying the Republicans are angels, but mostly the Democratic Party has always engaged in a significant level of fraud. I think what happened in 2020 was that they went over the margins, they went over the lines. And, I think that's what brought us to where we are today. John, let's go to our first guest. Brock Pierce was a 2020 candidate for President of the United States. He's an entrepreneur, a global leader and pioneer in digital currency technology, and he's raised more than $5 billion for the company he's founded. Brock, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
As a libertarian, I've got to ask you, are you starting to feel like a guy on a deserted island who's seeing the last possible ship leave very quickly from your shores?
Am I feeling like, no, I know 2020 has been a very tough year for everyone, but I remain very optimistic, and I'm excited for 2021.
Do you see the news media, the social media outlets and so forth doing everything possible to keep libertarian concepts out of the public square?
Well, that's one of the big problems we have in this country right now, where the United States feels like the divided states. It's very polarized, and a lot of the things that we need to be hearing as Americans right now, we're not hearing. It definitely feels like censorship is preventing the message, the word from getting out. But again, as I said, I'm optimistic. I remain hopeful. Technology will deliver us a solution.
Could you elaborate on that, please? What do you mean that technology will give a solution?
Well, let's think about media historically, right? You only had a handful of newspapers and a handful of news channels and a fair amount in radio. Certainly, I think broader distribution. And what the internet has done is it's created essentially an infinite number of channels for distribution. Obviously, you've got the largest tech giants that are really controlling the narrative through social. But technology at its core is fundamentally changing the way that media, content, and information is distributed. And as we, the people, become aware that we're not getting the full message, I believe many of us are going to go seek out truth, and it's there to be found. It's just not front and center. And with time, eventually, the people are going to be served what it is that they want. Because at the end of the day, business has to serve its customers. And I think the American people are waking up to the fact that there is more information and more to be known.
Is it a concern to you that the biggest search engine, for example, Google, goes out of its way to really only give a certain type of result to search queries, and it's always generally a significantly leftist result?
I'm deeply concerned by the fact that free speech, which is so important, it's so fundamental to the freedom that we have here in this country. And it's deeply concerning that the messages are being swayed and censored to push a particular bias rather than empowering the American people to have all the information and to choose for themselves.
Now, if you go back to the 1790s, President George Washington warned the country that the worst thing that could happen to its politics would be the establishment of political parties. You ran as a bit of an outsider. You ran as a Libertarian Party candidate. What was that experience like?
Well, I ran as an independent with no party affiliation at all. I was endorsed and nominated by the Independence Party of New York, but I ran truly as an independent. And what I can tell you is the system is rigged to prevent candidates such as myself from running for office. For example, to run for president as a Democrat or a Republican, you need about 25,000 petitions or signatures. As an independent or third-party candidate, you need about 700,000 signatures. I could talk to you for hours about what I've learned, but I think those numbers speak for themselves. And with every election cycle, the bar keeps getting higher and higher, and I think it's imperative that we continue to have choices, more choices, and not be limited to just red and blue. And that's a big part of why I ran. I needed to understand the issues for candidates running for office so that I can assist others going forward. And so that's what this was about for me. It was an exploratory mission to understand how it works, how to run for office. And I've completed basic training. I understand what to do for myself as well as other independent candidates or candidates that have big, bold, new ideas that we're going to need going forward.
So do you have some plans then for running for office again in the future?
I do. I wouldn't have done this if it were not part of a longer story. I just turned 40 a few weeks ago, and I'm committed to serving this country in every way I possibly can. And this isn't just about me. I did this work to be able to enable and empower others. I think we need a government of, for, and by the people. We need more people running for office because they care, not because they want something, but because they think that there's something wrong. I think we're doomed if we don't do something different. But as I said, I continue to be optimistic. I believe in us. I believe in this country, and I believe in the American people.
As someone who obviously has his finger on financial gain, I mean, you certainly raised a lot of money for the companies that you founded. Are you interested in founding, for example, an independent or competing web service or a search engine to Google?
Oh, I've been supporting all sorts of things that are going to enable the philosophical belief of more freedom, more independent thinking, more truth, more choice. And so I'm all over building and supporting and advising those organizations that are building tools to do just that.
Do you think that you could tie in, for me and for the viewers, your involvement with cryptocurrency with these principles of freedom and choice?
Yeah, so that's a big part of what it is. When you understand the underlying technology behind these systems, what they are is they're decentralized systems that no one owns or controls and that no one can censor or shut down. Meaning what they will enable with time is that information, being made available to us. Bitcoin, for example, is essentially digital gold that no one owns and controls. You can send that digital gold anywhere in the world instantaneously. One of the other things, for example, that I helped co-create, I was one of the founders of a thing called Tether, where we created the US digital dollar using the same technology that makes Bitcoin possible, often referred to as the blockchain. That digital dollar is doing around $100 billion a day in transactional volume, about $30 trillion a year, perhaps the most important innovation in monetary systems in a long time. But it's not just for the movement of value. The same thing can be used for information. I believe that this technology is what will enable that search engine you referred to. It's the thing that will enable new channels of media and distribution that can't be censored. And so I'm a huge advocate philosophically for what this technology can enable.
Now, I'm an utter novice at this. And so I'm believing that there's probably quite a few of our viewers who don't know a lot about cryptocurrency and how it works. Can you give me a basic rundown of how that system functions?
Yeah, so it's an open source system, meaning it's just open to anyone. Anyone can review the code, copy the code, do whatever they wish with the code. And what empowers that system is anyone can run a server to basically power it. And by running a server, you become part of the infrastructure that secures it. And so you have computers all over the world that are powering that network, meaning it's not a centralized system where one person has the ability to turn it on or off. It's powered by people, individuals all over the world, enabling that system by essentially providing computers or servers to empower that. And then what are the applications that you put on top of it? The first of which was Bitcoin, which is an alternative system of value. And now we're seeing hundreds of other things like it. And what that means, and it solved the biggest like computer science, the holy grail of computer science problems. So the internet that we use today, call it the Internet of Information, you can copy pictures and music and movies, and you can copy things and create duplicates of it. With this database, this architecture, you can't copy anything. So it's really important in the sense that if you have a Bitcoin or if you have a US dollar on this system, no one can duplicate it. It's also very effective for things like elections. No one can copy or, create multiple votes. It's the most secure system the world has ever seen. Anything that is written into this system is immutable, meaning that no one can ever edit what's occurred there. And it's an entirely transparent system in all ways that are needed. And so it's a revolutionary thing that it's much bigger than the internet, and it's going to change the world in a far, far bigger way. I definitely encourage everyone, to go buy $10 worth of this stuff. If someone told you that email was going to be a big deal or the internet was going to be a big deal in 1996, you would have benefited from being an early adopter. I don't encourage anyone to invest in this stuff. I encourage people to invest in themselves, in their own knowing, and through that knowledge, it will empower you to make informed decisions for yourself going forward.
Now, national governments at least allege that the full faith and credit of their government stands behind their traditional currency. If it's not gold and silver, it's at least a promise on the part of the government that it'll use its resources to back its currency. Some governments do that more than others, of course. What is the basis, though, of Bitcoin, of cryptocurrency? Is there a pot of gold someplace? Is there something that stands behind the inherent value of the currency?
Yeah, so this is always a good question. Where does value come from? Value is derived from consensus, meaning for anything to have value, two or more people have to agree that it does, and that's what makes something valuable. Meaning if you're the only person in the world that believes something is valuable, it only has sentimental value to you. When two people agree that something has value, that's what actually gives it value. There isn't really inherent value in anything. It's consensus that creates it. And the more people that agree that something has value, the more real that becomes. So it's really a belief system. It's a faith system. It's a system of trust. And this system is so trustworthy that it's trustless. You don't even need trust. And that is ultimately why people ascribe value to it. And there's also scarcity. And the same reason that gold and precious metals have had value for thousands of years is because there's a finite supply, that it's alienable, it's fungible. There's some basic principles around it. And Bitcoin, for example, has just that. And it's better at every one of those things than gold, for example. The only difference that's substantial beyond those attributes being more real with Bitcoin is that one is tangible and one is intangible. And I would make the argument that intangible long-term is going to be more valuable because you can send that piece of gold anywhere in the world efficiently and instantaneously versus, having to deliver it by hand, fly around the world. And it's much more malleable. You can take it apart instantaneously and you don't have to measure it. You don't have to test the purity of it or anything else. And so it's a really powerful system. The best way to think of it is gold 2.0.
It's utterly fascinating. And this ties in very closely with your libertarian principles, I see.
Yeah, and please forgive me for all the background noise. I'm actually in the White House right now for the annual Hanukkah party. So happy holidays, everyone. And
Yes.
So I'm a believer that we as Americans need choice. And I believe in continual innovation. I think we're doomed if we don't do something different. And I think that there are 21st century solutions to our 21st century problems. The only way out of the mess that we're going to find ourselves in is through innovation. And so I encourage more and more innovation.
Let me ask you then, if you go back to some of the things that libertarians cherish in terms of what really has made libertarianism popular in the United States, we go back to the books, for example, of Ayn Rand, particularly Atlas Shrugged. Do you see the United States sort of devolving into that Atlas Shrugged scenario right now of the takers versus the producers?
Well, we're seeing a bunch of it. I mean, look at SpaceX and Elon Musk. He's left California and he's moving his business to Texas. And government is going to have to do a more effective job of recognizing that in this, call it, era of globalization and mobility, that you're going to have to compete for these businesses. You're going to have to really provide them with the support to keep them there. And we're starting to see that. COVID has definitely accelerated this trend of virtualization and that you can work from anywhere. And obviously, improved communications and telecommunications have enabled us so that we don't need to be in a major hub to have access to information in real time. And so we're seeing it. There's an exodus happening right now out of California and New York to other places like Florida. It's happening, not exactly as it was described in the book, but we're watching this happen right now.
If I can ask you about your views of the recent election. You've heard, of course, the allegations regarding the Dominion software that was used in various states. What is your view of the allegations of tampering with the Dominion software?
So I'm not well versed enough to be able to say to what degree that had an impact and how and what the impact was. But I'm of course there are always things happening. There's always cheating. The question, was it organized, and would it have made a difference, and to what degree has it impacted things? One thing that we know is absolutely certain is that many of the American people are questioning the integrity of our democratic process. And that really undermines our collective future. And we have technological solutions that would enable us to be able to vote from our phones with absolute integrity. The technology exists. It will take a while for it to be implemented, but it requires systems that are transparent. It requires systems that can't be tampered with. And those technologies exist. The first time anyone voted using this blockchain technology in a general presidential election occurred in this election cycle. It happened in Utah, specifically in Utah County. And it was a vote cast for me, or a ballot cast for me. And it was the first vote cast in the state of Utah. So for a few hours, I had more votes than every other candidate combined. And I hope we see more of these systems implemented, systems that we can rely on. But it will take a while for people to understand and become confident in those systems. But clearly, we're going to need it. Right now, the American people are questioning the integrity of that system. So whether it's true, whether it's not, it is an issue that must be addressed.
Isn't there an inherent danger, though, in making it so easy to vote? You're sitting at your desk, you're sitting on your couch, and you cast a vote. You would assume at least if people have to get up off their couch to go into a polling place, then perhaps they've cared also enough to do a little research into the candidates. You get the impression that possibly folks who are just voting on the internet or even dropping a ballot in the mail may not have done the research that perhaps the more traditional voters have done.
Well, I think that as we make things easier and make it more accessible, that'll create more engagement. As people become more engaged, I believe that they'll do more research as they become participants. You know, the future is going to happen to us, or it's going to happen with us. And I believe as people feel like their vote or their voice matters and counts, I believe that, you know, they'll become more engaged, and through that, they'll do more research. I know that that would be the other end of the concern, but something tells me that's not how it will go. You know, as you become a participant in systems, as you become a participant in things, as you become engaged, it is the natural way of things to, you know, want to know more. But you have to make things easier for people. So I believe that it will be a positive, but time will tell. I can't say because it hasn't happened yet. But that's my firm belief.
You know, you mentioned the space companies moving, starting their own space programs, things of that sort. You know, you wonder if back in 1776, if you needed government permission to go west, whether we'd still be 13 states clinging to the eastern seaboard. Now, of course, that we have these private space companies, some of them have extraordinarily ambitious plans getting to Mars, for example, before the national governments do. Do you think that's going to accelerate technology, accelerate the exploration and exploitation of outer space?
I think there's no question the private sector, driven by capitalism, is always going to be more ambitious, more aggressive, and will do things far faster than the government can or will. And then the question is, to what extent, how competitive is it? It's important that you have a bunch of different people doing it, not just one company. We don't want one company or one person controlling, call it the future of space. And so I think it's a good, it's how does the public sector and the private sector work together? And I'm excited by the prospects of space programs. It's been a while since we landed on the moon. It's about time we start continuing to make progress in that department. And clearly it's come out of the private sector and not the public.
Brock Pierce reporting from the White House today. Happy Hanukkah, my friend.
Thank you. Happy Hanukkah and happy holidays.
Thank you.
I've heard a story. Someone said if there had been a computer back in 1776, that it would have computed that considering the population growth of major cities in North America at the time, that they would be unlivable in 100 years because all the horse manure that would be needed to move those people and their goods around would have made the cities unlivable. You wonder we are now at the crux of something similar, where the technology is moving at such a quick rate that we can't really see where it's going to come out on the other end.
Well, we've heard these futurist predictions before, especially in the environmental field.
Mm-hmm.
You're old enough to remember the book Silent Spring.
Indeed.
Rachel Carson in the early 70s that predicted by this time the forests would be completely empty of all animal life as a result of pollution. You can see none of that came true.
Yeah, by the way, some people claim that Rachel Carson is the greatest mass murderer of all time because her screeds against using things like DDT and some other stuff caused the deaths of millions of people from mosquito-borne diseases. So it's interesting, the ramifications of taking one path as opposed to the other.
Yeah, well, look at Al Gore, for instance. According to Al Gore, we're all underwater now. This is around the time that his predictions in an inconvenient truth were all supposed to occur. I don't see, I'm not standing on water right now, so I don't know what he was talking about. And there's still plenty of polar bears.
Yeah, and the one I love the most, perhaps, is Barack Obama, who told us all that we were about to be submerged. Don't build a house anywhere near a shoreline. Who just bought a multi-mega million-dollar mansion on Cape Cod. Well, I guess Barack Obama, like me, doesn't believe Barack Obama.
No, well, Al Gore obviously doesn't believe Al Gore. He still jets around in fuel-eating jets and lives in something like 4 or 5 houses. And I might be underestimating how many houses he has.
While lecturing middle-class Americans that driving their compact car to the mall to buy something for their 1,500 square foot home is somehow destroying the environment.
That makes me think, by the way, of Joe Biden's choice for climate czar, John Kerry. A multi-millionaire, thanks to his wife's fortunes, not his own,
right?
Who owns something like 12 mansions, has a private jet, and is going to tell us about how climate change is killing the planet.
The hypocrisy is astounding, and it just doesn't seem to stop. And again, going back to our conversation with Brock, part of that has to do with the fact that the logical portions of all this, the hypocrisy, is always knocked out by social media and by the social media giants. If you try to have this conversation on Facebook or Twitter, you find out a lot of it's going to be censored out. If you go to Google and you try to do a search on this sort of thing, you'll really find that you're not going to get many results that disagree with Barack Obama or with John Kerry. They are so concentrated on one area. Hey, John, let's go to our next guest. And it's a name Americans certainly recognized. Sheriff Joe Arpaio, America's sheriff, was the Maricopa County Sheriff for a record 24 years. He has diligently investigated corruption and created a cold case posse in 2011 to investigate whether Obama's birth certificate was a forgery. His new fascinating book is Sheriff Joe Arpaio, an American Legend. Sheriff Joe, welcome to the program.
Yeah, I'm from your neighbor there, Massachusetts, born and raised. My mother and father came from Italy, and just sure Joe Arpaio, American Legend. You can get that great book from Amazon. But anyway, thank you for thinking of me. Thank you for calling me, and thank you for giving me a chance to tell it like it is, since many of the media won't even touch my book, although I've been on 100 shows, but not locally. They don't want me to talk about the book, the local media. So thank you for giving me that chance.
Let me
Sheriff,
ask you a question off the bat. Did you ever think there would be a time when, as you did during your years in Maricopa County, when simply enforcing laws already on the books would be considered controversial?
Well, you know, when you mentioned a birth certificate, I'm not stupid. I was head of the federal drug enforcement in Turkey, Mexico, you name it, around the United States. So being an ex-federal guy, you think knowing that I'm going to take on the president, that I would not have repercussions, big time repercussions. So I decided to do it. I report to the people. I don't report to any governor, mayor. I'm an elected sheriff, so I did it. Proud of it. And I'm right. It's 150% guaranteed as a fake government document. When I started this, I told the world that I don't care where Obama was born, I'm going after a fake document, period. And I say that till today. So evidently the former president can get a pass on fake government documents when all the illegals that I have arrested, thousands and hundreds of thousands, and a lot of them were here with fake government documents, they all went to jail. So why is there a double standard regarding the controversial investigation I did and the subject matter? So one thing I can never understand, how the news media, government officials, politicians, no one will touch this. No one will at least call me, a guy that has 58 years experience in law enforcement around the world, and say, at least, Sheriff, what do you have? They avoid it. They don't want to talk about it, and they cover it up. So to me, that's the mystery of one of my situations. After I'm gonna tell you my age. It's the Italian olive oil. I'm 88 years old and still going strong. So that's one mystery. And the book will define the proof that I have that nobody can ever contest.
well, Sheriff Joe, I'm John Wilson. I'm a former judge from New York City, and I want to tell you that I've had occasion more than once to cite to you in some of the sentencings I've had with prisoners. I remember some of your more colorful what you did with prisoners, for instance, keeping them in pink jumpsuits and telling them if they don't like it here, it's not a hotel, they don't have to be here. So I'm a big fan. I want you to know that. I'm curious about some of the evidence that you outline in your book. Could you give us a sample of some of the information that you uncovered regarding the birth certificate?
Yeah, Judge, I'll be glad to do it. It's all accurate, Judge. Nothing in that book that I didn't keep documentation from the day that I was born. I have about 5,000 videos that I've been interviewed, plus kept everything, my reports. I don't know why I did it. I never thought I'd be writing a book or a movie and that type of thing. So I'm very comfortable with what I said in there. Now, when you could talk about the birth certificate, it's very complex in a way because you have a law firm named Perkins Cooley or Cooley, whatever and they're a big, big law firm. They're the ones with 24 Congress people under Nadler in Washington that went after my pardon, wanted to take it away, which he can never do. It's just a harassment. That's the same law firm that delivered the money to Hillary Clinton to pay the Russian informer Steele. That's the same law firm that joined with George Soros, the billionaire, when I was running for sheriff in 2016 and gave $3 million to get me defeated during that race. That's the same law firm that Obama hired. A private lawyer did not want to make it official because it would be in the archives. It delivered. It went to Hawaii and delivered a document. We know probably to Washington, you know which document I'm talking about. So that's the same law firm, Perkins Coie. So you see how I intertwine just in that one investigation. And I really believe when they went after me full force in 2016, when the federal judge, the most biased judge I ever met in my 58 years of law enforcement, biased judge, went after me on alleged racial profiling. There was no racial profiling, but he got me, turned me over to another judge for a contempt of court. And actually, that judge, there was no evidence, still backed up the other judge and found me guilty of a contempt of court, like it is a misdemeanor, same as a barking dog, and went after me, no jury trial. And it took Obama and Biden 8 years to get me, 8 years, and all they could get me on was some judge saying I didn't obey his orders about arresting illegal aliens. That's it. 8 years it took them. And when they took office, you always get 100 days what you're going to concentrate on. I was one of the targets. They wanted to get after me, even though they said they didn't have the evidence, because I guess I was rocking the boat, doing my duty, arresting those in this country for being illegal immigrants. So I'm not angry. I'm disappointed in the criminal justice system. I always got along with judges till I met this federal judge. And when you read the book, you'll see some of the situations that he did. But that's okay. So they started the investigation the day before early voting. Early voting, now they're complaining to the Department of Justice, oh, we don't open investigations during the political voting process. Really? How come they went after me the day before voting started? So I can go on and on. I'm a little disappointed in our criminal justice / political system.
During the Obama administration, famously, the Internal Revenue Service was used as a bludgeon against those who disagreed with the Obama administration. The Department of Justice itself was used to legally harass groups like the Mackinac Research Institute or the Competitive Enterprise Institute, who wrote white papers about Obama's mistakes when it comes to climate change. Do you see a line going from that misuse right until the current election cycle, where we're being told ignore fraud, ignore the way states are changing the rules of the game in the middle of the road to make sure the candidates they favor win?
Well, listen, we got a good example of a victim, and I'm a victim too, but I'm nothing compared to our President Trump, who, by the way, I was the only one to get introduce him in July 2015 in his first rally. It happened to be in Phoenix. I said three things. There's a silent majority out there. Now it's not silent anymore. We were born on the same day, Flag Day, June 14, and I looked them in the eye and said, you're going to be the next president. So they went after him from day one, try to take him down and violate every ethics and constitutional situations to take this man down. So I think he personifies what you talk about, the IRS and everything, and they went after him on everything. In fact, they probably are going after him on the IRS or banking or that type of thing. Anyway, they keep throwing that out there. So they're using their resources to get rid of Trump, and it's sad. And I fear somewhat of what's going to happen to our country, but But since I've been around a long time, through a lot of cycles, I still have confidence that this is the greatest country in the universe, and we'll get out of this one too. But in the process, we may lose some ground, and we're going to have to work hard to get back to what this country should be.
You know, I have my own pet theory about Barack Obama, and if you don't mind, I'd share it with you to get your comments on this theory. Barack Obama has a family name of Soweto, I believe, Barry Soweto, and if I remember correctly, his college records are still sealed. And I've had a theory that that's because Barack Obama attended college under the name Barry Soweto and posed as a foreign student to get funding for his college career. You've done research on Obama's birth certificate. How does that theory coincide with your research?
Well, to be honest with you, I opened this up. I psyched my mind out, and my chief investigator did a great job for 5 years for no money, as volunteer. But I psyched it, and I said, I don't want to hear about anything else. I'm talking about a fake government document. Now, I know about the document, or whether you said Negro or African American. I didn't want to hear any of that. What really put the knife in this situation was the fact that just before I left office, found a lady that had a birth certificate around the same time that Obama's came out. And I'm not a computer expert, but there's one thing I can understand. When you remove 8 items from one piece of paper, her birth certificate, and they paste it on his birth certificate, alleged birth certificate, and I went to Italy to get an expert forensic scientist who actually testified before the Italian Supreme Court and asked them to look at it. And I think they were trying to do another Italian, me, a favor, figuring it was all garbage. No, they looked at it and they said, wait a minute, this is a fake. I had another expert in Hawaii that actually likes Obama, 25-year experience. He did the same thing, not knowing the Italians did. So what do you have to be, a scientist, a rocket scientist, when you take something from one paper and put it on the other? I mean, how much more evidence? That's at least a smoking gun, probable cause. I look at it as a smoking cannon. So my question has always been, why isn't the CIA, FBI, any government agency, why isn't the media coming to me and at least say, can we see your report? That is what concerns me. And you know the answer, Judge. You know what's going on. They don't want to bring it out. And, you know, I don't care about where he was born. On the other hand, once that's proven as fake, I guess the next step would be, and I said it from day one, show me the real birth certificate, I'm going south. They never did. So that would be the answer. Show the real birth certificate. If you can't, then you throw the investigators, figure out what's going on. I didn't have subpoena powers because I wasn't a federal guy, but I did have the right and authority to investigate because that would have pertained, if he wasn't here legally, to the voting public in my county. So nobody contests that. So that's been my dilemma regarding that issue. And I really think George Soros, all those people, went after me to get rid of me. And that's another story, how they did that. That's in one of my chapters, very interesting. But they wanted me out, not because of my crackdown on illegal immigration, which really brought the world against me. I think it was a birth certificate. They figured once I left, I'd go fishing, 88 years old, and I will go away. Well, I got news for them. I'm not going away. I'm active 14 hours a day, and I'm a private citizen, which is the most powerful position you can have. And I do know my last election, which I tried to get my job back and lost by 1%, which is a shock to me and everybody else. I should have won the primary. So I didn't win. I wasn't able to help Trump in the general election. So that's the way it is. Life goes on, but we can't surrender. We can't give in. And people like you are very important because you try to tell the other side, which is a real side. And when they black me out, including Fox, I've been with Fox for 24 years. I know them all. Why did they block me out the last year? A whole year. Don't even know how to spell my name anymore. Very interesting. So you can see how the media has done everything to get rid of this sheriff and the professional. I call them he calls them, Trump calls them the swamp. I call it the establishment. When you have every owner of the Cardinals, the Diamondbacks, and they give $12,000 to my Democrat opponent, sheriff, who took $3 million used to get me out of office, and they give all that money to him when they knew I'm running. And the New York
Sheriff, I wanted
Times,
to ask you on that very point. We've seen a lot of money go to what used to be considered, frankly, not sensational races for state attorney general or county district attorneys, that sort of thing. Now, all of a sudden, we're seeing huge amounts of money, particularly from the DNC or from Soros or people like that, going to those races. How serious a problem is that for the future of justice in the United States?
well, I think somebody ought to look at him. I don't know why nobody touches him. I guess presumably he has Republicans in his bag too. Or the establishment, and why would they go after me? I'm a sheriff. He's never gone after sheriffs, gone after district attorneys. I'm the first one, but he went big time. $3 million, $3 million to get rid of me on a little Mickey Mouse contempt of court. So that's what they're doing. They're controlling the system, whether it's fraudulent or whatever. They're controlling it. They seem to have won so far. I hope Donald Trump can pull a Trump card out of his bag, but if he can't, I hope that he runs for office again right away. And I talk to him. I don't go around bragging how many times I talk to him and so on. But in my book, I call him it's not a book on Trump. It's my book and everything I went through. But I still call him my hero. I've done it 6 times in the book. I stand by it. People don't like it. Good. Let them do it. Let them not like it. Doesn't bother me.
Sheriff Joe, from your years of fighting the tide of illegal immigration at the border, you see that the Trump administration made its best effort to build a wall. Have you seen any effect of those efforts? And if so, tell me about them.
Well, first of all, I've been fighting that border issue for 38 years as the head of the DEA in Mexico, Central America. I can go on. And 24 years as sheriff. I didn't realize after 58 years, I spent all those years involved in the border. Now, I'm for the wall. The president's doing the right thing to build that wall. A lot of controversy. They went after him from all angles. But I don't think it's just important for illegal immigration. I've been saying, and politicians don't say it, is we got to stop the drug traffic. These political people, they run down, every time they run down to the border, stand in front of the chicken fence, and they say, we got to stop illegal immigration. We must control the border. They never talk about the drugs. We're being flooded with drugs, and it's always illegal immigration. Now the tide is turning now. Now they're back a little on the drug problem because they know we're being flooded with it. So the wall is important to keep the dope peddlers out of our country. 2, not just illegal immigration.
Sheriff, thank you so much, not only for being with us today, but for all the great work you have done throughout your career. And the book again is Sheriff Joe Arpaio, An American Legend. Thank you, Sheriff.
And you can get it from Amazon. Hey, listen, thank you. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays. Merry
You
Christmas.
too, Sheriff.
Thank you.
We welcome our newest radio affiliate in Washington, D.C. at 96.7 FM. Watch us throughout the nation on Roku, public broadcast stations, and the AMFM247.com network. Tell Alexa to open the AMFM247.com network and play the program. You can also access us anytime on our website, usagovpolicy.com. Join us again next week. We are sponsored by the New York Analysis of Policy and Government, a division of the American Analysis of News and Media, Inc. at usagovpolicy.com and the Institute for American Politics. Email us at truthandradio@gmail.com. Our producer is the amazing Abigail White, and our director is the brilliant Jeff Hansen.